Hello, Dylan. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right. My name's Pete, and I'm going to be the moderator. I'm going to go ahead and name myself here.
What happened to Taylor?
I haven't seen Taylor in the waiting room yet.
Okay. I thought
So
he
I'm
was going to be the
watching.
moderator, but no worries.
Okay.
Actually, I guess worries. He has my slides.
Taylor would be the facilitator, I believe. I'm going to be the moderator. I'm the technical person. Oh, here, let me turn on my video so you can see.
No worries then.
Perfect. All right. So yeah, we're just waiting at this point for Taylor to show up. Anybody else that I might, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make you a co-host. And then you will be able to have all the privileges that I do.
No one else aside from Taylor, I don't think.
Okay. And wouldn't be under a different name?
No, let me give him a call here.
Taylor's got the presentations, is that correct? Good.
There he is.
Yep, he just came into the waiting room.
Good afternoon, my friends.
Hello there. How are you, Taylor? I'm Pete. I'll be the moderator. You're the facilitator, right?
Facilitator and monitor, I believe.
Okay, let me make you a co-host. Here we are.
And I'll be running the slides as well, so that will
Perfect. Now we have a good opportunity to test those. So you want to try and share your screen and make sure that you can show your slides. There we go. Yeah, perfect. That looks great.
Sweet.
Yep, looks good.
Cool. Any last minute adjustments, Dylan?
Yeah, I don't like the color. Can we change the color on everything?
You're the one who made this,
redo all
man.
the slides, would you please, quick?
Yeah. Let me call Angela really quick. I'll get on that.
Okay, yeah. Man, I just got off Teams. We need to standardize what everyone's using these days. I can't flip flop.
There's at least like 4 or 5 services between everything we do, you know, so.
But none of them are Skype, which is strange, isn't it?
I think that's hilarious, frankly. Because I use Skype a lot when it was, you know, back in the day.
Yeah, you know, when I was 13 or whatever, Skyping my friends.
I will be right back.
So where you at, Pete?
It would help if I unmuted before I started talking. I am currently in Anchorage.
Oh, right on. Okay.
Yeah. But I live just outside Seattle. But I'm up in our offices in Alaska this week and doing this fun gig.
Cool. Got a aunt in Tacoma. Beautiful country. Yeah.
Yeah, I live up in North Bend. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say I have an aunt and uncle in Tacoma as well.
Oh, small world.
I got family.
Yeah, I
all
live
over.
up east of Seattle in North Bend.
That's cool.
You know where that is?
Yeah.
Up toward the Snoqualmie Pass.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my dad grew up around there.
Do we have any folks from the Snoqualmie tribe that you're aware of in the conference?
I'm not sure. We're both Alaska guys.
Yeah. Well, I was just telling Dylan too. I'm in Anchorage right now.
Oh, cool.
And we've got about 27 folks in the waiting room so far. Looking to see if we have any VIPs I need to let in.
I wish
Ahead
my
of
light
time.
was better. That's a little better.
All right. You got the survey link ready, Taylor?
Let me make sure I've got it. Yes, right here.
Perfect. All right, then we should be good to go. Got 3 minutes here before we start. I think anything you guys need before we get going? Stack of hundreds in a month off, maybe?
That and some champagne, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm a simple man.
I'm just drinking my LaCroix. That's all I got.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're good to go.
All right. Do you want me to just do a quick introduction of the two of you before we get, once we let everybody into the waiting room, and I'll just turn it over to you? Does that work?
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Perfect. All right. I'll do it right at 1:30. I'll let everybody in. That's about a minute and a half away, if that's all right.
Works for me.
All right. I am going to hit the admit all, if you guys are good with that. It'll take them a moment to all roll in. All right, welcome everyone to the second session. My name's Pete and I'll be the moderator today. And I'm going to introduce both Dylan and, oh gosh, I already forgot, Dylan and Taylor. Sorry guys. They're going to be your presenters for today. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to them. Take it away, guys.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. We are coming to you today from Alaska, and this is the Growing Social Media and Increasing Engagement workshop. We're excited to have you all join us. I want to lay down a couple ground rules before we get started here. As Pete said, my name is Taylor Hodges. I work for the Alaska Region Training and Technical Assistance Center. I'm the communications specialist. And for the purposes of this workshop today, I'm going to ask you if you have questions, please put them in the chat box. And we'll be monitoring this and do a Q&A session at the end. At the end, if you have questions, feel free to use the feature on Zoom to raise your hand, and we'll get to you that way. I'm going to put right now a survey link in the chat. If you could fill that out, we would really appreciate that. Excuse me. And yeah, I'll also drop that in there at the end if anybody's interested. And just a reminder that all these workshops are being recorded. So if you'd like to go back and revisit what we've got going on here today, please feel free to do that. It'll be on the live agenda page, and they'll be available after the conference. And with that, I would like to introduce my friend and colleague, Dylan Blankenship.
Hello, everyone. Happy to be here today. It's finally getting sunny here in Alaska, so it's a good day. The sun's out, and I'm sure Taylor can relate. It's been a long, dark winter. So happy to be here and happy to present, share some knowledge. Go ahead with the next slide, please. So as you know, I am Dylan Blankenship. I've spent most of my career in outreach, specifically here in Alaska and specifically rural communities. I grew up in Utqiagvik. Of course, when I was there, it was called Barrow, and also proud to say came from the Wind River Indian Reservation there in Wyoming. So I've helped a lot of small and large organizations with outreach needs, in addition to my own small business, which is a peony farm. And my wife and I have a lot of fun running that. Next slide, please. So in order to develop an effective outreach plan using social media, there's about 4 real steps. And if you do all these steps right, it kind of becomes a cycle that feeds back into itself, but we'll get there in a second. The first step is defining your parameters. Really, what are you saying and who are you saying it to? The second step is planning. And it's the largest step. You'll find that out here soon. And that is how to impactfully use all of your resources. Lastly, or sorry, not lastly, third is implementation. This is really the meat and potatoes of the whole process, the labor intensive, putting your plan into action and getting those results. And the last step is analyzing, understanding what those results mean and what to do with them. Next slide, please. So define failure as feedback, or as Peter Dager says, losing is learning. Next slide, please. So goals or objectives. We want to make a good objective. And what's the best way to do this? It's to come up with a tangible number that will be the bedrock of your communications plan. So in my example here, I want to have 30 people sign up for an environmental cleanup. Next slide. So a quick sidebar on your objective. If you have total control of your project, good for you, but most of us have to report to some boss or group of some kind. So make sure it reflects the larger objective of your entire working community. Talk with your peers or your boss and really figure out what it is that your organization wants to say in this specific message. Next slide, please. So an objective should definitely be data-driven. Largely, this is because a lot of those results you're going to get that I mentioned earlier, those are going to be backed with data and a lot of graphs and numbers. And so in order to measure your objective and get some actual meaning out of it, instead of, oh, it's 30%, make sure it's data-driven. This will really make it impactful later on down the road. And there's just tons of data out there. So you want to stick with one point, but we'll get to specificity later. Next slide, please. So you want to make it smart. So specific. And again, we're going to tie that into audience here in a sec, but it's good to touch on it now. Really, you want to keep it simple and keep it specific. Measurable, we go back to data again. If your objective is measurable, so will your outcome. And that's going to be very helpful when it comes to analyzing and tailoring your communications plan for the next time you need to get a message out there. Attainable, this is always up to you. Attainability is based upon how much work and really time you can put in. With enough effort and time, you can attain anything. But remember your organization, there's a lot of objectives, a lot of goals going around, and communication is only one of them. So attainability is really a measure of how much time you want to put into communicating. Relevant seems obvious, keep it relevant, but from your objective to your goal to all the way to making the content and putting it out there, you can easily get lost. So always just remind yourself, keep this relevant and How do you keep it relevant? We'll get to that. That has to do with your audience as well. And time-based is very important. If you're anything like me, you don't do the project till like, the deadline's there. So have a deadline in case you have people like me on your team. Next slide. So here are some examples of other social media related objectives. Remember my earlier objective of getting 30 people to volunteer? You can put in the chat, which one of these do you think would be a relevant objective to that? I'm not seeing anything, that's all right. But I would say there's no real wrong answer. Getting 500 views within the state of Alaska would probably be the most meaningful objective to tie into my other objective, which is to get people to clean up. Next slide, please. So audience, you have your objective set, back with that nice tangible number in there. So who are you going to get that out to? Back to our environmental cleanup example, I've worked with 5-year-olds before, and they're probably not the best crowd to stand in the sun all day and pick up trash over long hours, right? So other people might want to help. They're located 100 miles away. That's not very helpful either. So in my example, I want relatively young people within driving distance, let's say 25 miles away, and have a special interest in the outdoors. That's probably a good crowd to communicate this. Hey, I want to pick up trash message with. Next slide, please. And Pete, I'll get to that in a second. Yeah, I got a question. So demographic, how do you find your audience? Who is your audience going to be? Demographics is a fantastic tool to figure that out, especially if you're going to use social media, which that's the purpose of this presentation. Because every social media platform you might choose, they divide all of their audience up based on these demographics already. And these are very scientific, cold, hard, what's your age, what's your location, what's your gender. So thinking back to our cleanup project, what 2 of these categories should I really be concerned with? You can put that in the chat, or we can address it at the end. Yeah, perfect, exactly, age and location. Yep, you guys are on this. Yeah, age and location are really the 2 I should focus on this, because that's what's going to matter most. Next slide, please. So anecdotal, this is the important part of your audience, right? You can tell the platform, hey, I want these demographics, but this is something only you can really understand. It helps, platforms are getting pretty good at teasing these out with what you like and what you subscribe to, but this is the art form. So age, gender, and location are all great. They aren't what make your audience unique. If you start trying to talk to your audience like they're numbers and graphs on a screen, it's going to get very frustrating and probably pretty boring for your audience. I've been talked to like that, and I tune out. So if you understand who you're talking to, then you can really start communicating and getting that message across. And that's things like family, lifestyle, their wants, traditions, culture. Like I said earlier, hey, it's daylight in Alaska now. That might be important to know if you're doing a specific campaign. Next slide, please. So remember how that SMART objective needed to be specific? This is really where it ties in. It's not just about reaching as many people as possible. We have to kind of think of ourselves as Goldilocks, trying to find, the porridge that's just the right temperature. We got to find that audience that is just right. Too broad, and your efforts are just going to not reach their full potential. You're competing for too many people's attention at once. It's not a good thing. And too narrow, and well, you might put too much effort to get to too little people, and you've just kind of limited yourself. So how do you find a good audience? You really want to combine both the demographic aspect and the anecdotal aspect, and that will get you pretty close to that sweet spot. So Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the last one is too specific. You're correct there in the chat. So which one do you think is probably a good middle ground? Yeah, the first one. Yeah, well, people with an interest in snow machines, I don't know, in Alaska, that's almost everyone. Yeah, so yeah, definitely the first one is probably that sweet middle spot there. Good job. We got a lively audience. I love to see it. Next slide, please. So what happens when you combine your audience and your objective? So tying back to my examples here, I want to have 30 people volunteer to sign up for an environmental cleanup. My audience is 18 to 35-year-olds within driving distance of Wasilla, and a special consideration should be given to those in the outdoors. You get your, next slide, please. Message. The culmination of all that preparation, and perhaps the most important part of your communication plan, is your message. And in mine, in this example, is Alaska needs your help staying beautiful. Volunteer to keep Wasilla clean. Next slide, please. So what makes a message effective? If you did all your prep work and you got your audience really down, it shouldn't be too hard to figure out. Because you want to make it relevant. That ties back into your audience. And sensitive, that also ties back into your audience. And your objective will help you with those last two parts. Yes, you want to stand out too. You know, that's a great, I should add that to this. You want to be creative, right? Stand out, pop. Yeah, that's a great one. And how do you do that? Well, keep it short. Everyone out there has very small attention spans, especially this guy talking. So short and clear. Next slide, please. So content, you got your message down. That's the heart. So content is going to be the body of your outreach plan. This is the most tangible part of the equation, and it's really going to be the most work intensive. It's the pretty package that's going to contain your message and will fight for the audience's attention. And like Christina was saying in the chat, this is really where it gets eye-popping and catching, and that's your content. So you're ahead of the game there, Christina. So here's an example of content, and someone actually previously pointed out to me that there was something wrong with this content I put on the slide. Can anyone guess what that is? It's okay, I missed it for a while. Spelling in the last sentence. You know what? That's a new one. Good job. Yeah, I didn't see the spelling either. No one else has. What my friend pointed out to me is it doesn't direct anyone anywhere. So it looks pretty. I did do a spelling error. I got really bad dyslexia. So good catch. But it doesn't point anyone anywhere. So it might look pretty and you might be like, oh, that's nice. But if they can't immediately figure out where they need to go, I'm going to scroll onto the dog video below this. So good job. Well, you guys are on top of it. Next slide, please. So content generation is really going to be the struggle. It's not labor intensive. You're not stacking bricks or hauling hay, but it becomes very challenging mentally to post creative and catchy content every day. So I'm just going to tell you right now, not all of your content will be exceptional. That's okay, because frequency is going to really be equally as important as good content. Just a little advice, content is always around you. Your audience, if they're already engaged with your page, if they're already reading what you have, they're already interested in you, which is great. So use that to your advantage. Keep your content organic. You want to post reality as much as you can. If you use too many, stock photos of, oh, here's some random people in an office, people don't like that. It's going to kind of damage your authenticity. If you're really struggling with content, I always recommend getting an office pet. Like I said, think of one day you went through social media and you didn't see a cat or a dog. Speaking of, anyone have any like weirdest office pet situations? That's always a good question. I've heard of a mini pig once. That's probably the weirdest office pet I've ever heard of. All right, moving on. Do flies count? Sure, flies count. Yes. Yeah, tell your supervisors you need an office pet. It's great content generation. Goldfish are always great. A plastic egg named Kevin. That one beats the mini pig. Hey, I would look at a picture of a plastic egg named Kevin online. I'd like that. So a side note in content. I was raised over in Germany, so this story is kind of funny to me. But you're all dealing with very unique audiences here. So I'm sure you all have funny stories of these as well. But mine is, you got to keep your culture in mind when creating your content. Clairol, they're a hair product company, found themselves in a little bit of an awkward situation. They created this hair wand and they called it the Mist Stick. And then they couldn't figure out why no one in Germany was buying it. That's because in German, mist is slang for manure, but not the nice way to say manure. And so they were trying to sell that. And man, I wouldn't want to be the marketing guy trying to sell that. Next slide, please. So planning. You got everything you need to get going. Your content, your objective, your audience. How do you use it? Make a plan. Next slide. So firstly, and this is kind of the most fun in my opinion, this is where you got to kind of go wild with your creativity, but it's to make a brand. Do it once and do it right, because changing your brand is a pain. It is no small task. Nova, sorry, I saw someone mention Nova in the chat. That's another great example. That was a car, right? They tried to sell in Mexico, and it sounds a lot like No Go. Not a great name for a car. Anyway, back to your brand. Rule number one, make it something you like, make it yours. Because if you're not going to wear it on your t-shirt or plastered on your car, how do you expect anyone else to really get excited about it? So make it yours, make it something you like. Number two, keep it simple as possible. 1, 2, maybe even 3 colors, but there's 2 good reasons for keeping it simple. One, you're going to be putting in a lot of things, right? From t-shirts to billboards, hopefully, which, fun fact, billboards are illegal in Alaska. But anyway, it gets difficult to start putting on a bunch of stuff if it's very complicated, especially when you're going from, pens all the way to projectors. Second, the more simple it is, the easier it is to remember. Oh, in Hawaii, I didn't know that. See, there's my attention span. So make it simple so people remember. An interesting rule of thumb that a brand kind of shares with a flag is a 5-year-old should be able to draw it pretty accurately from memory. Next slide, please. So platform, this seems really, really scary, but it's not. Yes, there are tons of social media platforms out there, and yes, more added every day. I am personally from the MySpace generation, which is already dated, makes me feel a little old, but each one requires time to learn, time to monitor, time to implement and manage. And if you're putting money towards a outreach campaign, it costs more money. So don't use them all. Seriously, the biggest pitfall I've encountered with many organizations is they try to have a presence on everything and they always try to chase the latest thing. Don't do that. Be like my grandmother. You pick one platform, post on it like 50 times a day, and accuse the rest of the platforms for stealing your recipes. Next slide. I'll continue on platform because it's important. It ties back to 2 things, your audience and your brand. If you're an environmental nonprofit, like our example, trying to reach a youthful audience, then you probably might want to chase the latest platform. if it fits your brand and it fits your audience. But if you're trying to educate elders on a local ordinance, dancing on TikTok might not get you there, might even have the opposite effect. Depends on your audience. I don't know. And I know it seems obvious, use what works for you, but it becomes very tempting once you start seeing a little success to mimic that everywhere and get good numbers on everything. And a lot of people go for it. I'll get into it later, but just because you have pretty good numbers on everything doesn't always correspond with meaningful outreach. Now, I know, here's the exception to the rule, right? Always do your research and keep abreast of new platforms coming out there. It's a very dynamic world, but keep your focus tight. Like I said, MySpace isn't a thing anymore. It'd be kind of a shame if you put all your effort into that. Facebook still is a thing. Who knew? No one knew it would become the new MySpace. And Google Plus never really became a thing. So I just point all that out to, you never know. So do some research, try things that might work for you, but don't feel like you have to do everything, I guess is the main thing I'm getting across. Don't put your eggs all in one basket unless you have an entire outreach team. Keep your platforms to a number you personally can manage, because in a lot of smaller projects I've worked on, one person ended up having to manage all of that, and it can get rough. Oh, I didn't do the line drawings. That is someone much more artistically talented than me. Thank you. So timeline, next slide, please. So outreach is very time sensitive. You want to establish a timeline of events. It's vital for success, and it will be so much easier on you down the road. Man, the fact that you can schedule everything to go out exactly when you want to, whenever, wherever you are, is such a great feature. And it's very easy to use if you got that timeline down. So what do you look for in a timeline? Consistency is number one. You don't have to be like radio consistency. I used to do radio. That was really consistent. That's like, it has to run at 4:32 every weekday because that's traffic. But it does need to be social media consistent. What's that? It's just daily exposure. There are a lot of ways to game this in your favor, like interaction counts, or you can, pay, which both put you higher up in people's feeds. But if you start seeing healthy numbers, you want to post once a day, at least. Twice a day is good. The easiest way to lose trust is when someone sees your last post was months ago. In the digital landscape of things, that's like almost like hanging up the out of business banner. It's just like, oh, they didn't post for a month. Well, I don't know if they're in business. So for best results, use your objective that you set as kind of the end date. My objective was I want 30 people to volunteer for cleanup. Okay, when do I want those 30 people? Boom, there's my timeline. Schedule all your content to go out in relation to this. So I need those 30 people by November. So I'm going to have one post every day until November, and I'm going to try to schedule 2 weeks in advance every week. Once every 2 days is the minimum. I know it gets hectic and you're like, oh man, I didn't get to post. So if you got to coast, once every 2 days. What are the times? That's good. We'll answer those questions in the Q&A because I can kind of go off on that for a little bit. Next slide, please. So external connections. Starting your presence from scratch is difficult. A lot of organizations I've worked with didn't have any money to throw at it. That's one way to kind of cheat and get some likes and followings right away. But there's another way to do it, and it's more free. It is free if you do it right. It's utilizing an already established presence. You know your community best, what's popular there, and who would support your cause. Reach out to them if they're a person or an organization, because remember, if you got a cool project, it looks just as good for them. That's the whole point of cross promoting. It's like, hey, this benefits me and it benefits you. So they might just do it for you because you got a cool project. I bet you do. But a word of caution, right? Don't trust your brand too easily. Don't go jump in and take anything you can get, do your research. I don't know if you can read that picture there, but this is the result of a already established presence who really didn't care about the brand that they were supporting. He literally just copy and pasted the email they sent to him. Doesn't look good. Next slide, please. So implementation, as you can tell from all my rambling so far, this is like 90% research, right? But that 10% is where the action is required. Next slide, please. So the difference between now and then is outreach is now a two-way street. Right back in the day, you threw some PSAs out and you kept track on who called you, and that was great. But now, as you begin getting those content out there, people are going to start talking back to you. Don't panic, right? This is great. It can become a lot of fun. It gives you the opportunity to really build your organization's credibility and tailor your image. And all the algorithms really like seeing people talking on your posts. Everyone knows about Wendy's. They're kind of infamous for this kind of PR strategy. It works for them. I wouldn't take the sort of risk with my organization, but it is a reminder to have fun. You know, this isn't a business meeting, it's a social media platform. So keep it respectful, but you can have fun with it. Keep it real. Next slide, please. So how do you generate this content? Plan as much as you can, but remember, you got to keep your stuff fresh. And there, I could have pulled a lot of bad examples of, you know, scheduled ads going out when it really shouldn't have, because you never know what's going to happen day to day. And you want to generate it all the time. You know, don't overshare and start like, you know, going to your coworker's lunch and taking pictures of it and sharing that. I don't know if anyone wants to see that, unless they're a chef. That'd be kind of cool. But absolutely do share your interactions with the community, as little or big as those may be. And that new office pet, or Kevin the office plastic egg, that's cool to share. So, you know, content's all around you. Fun little things like Kevin are a great example. Next slide, please. So the other 90% is analyzing that 10%. Next slide, please. You're going to get more data than you want or need. It's like those word problems from middle school. Those were perfect for getting us ready for social media feedback. But you will also get a lot of very good numbers to help you improve. Each platform is a little bit different in what they're trying to tell you, but largely they all mean the same thing. I'm going to be using, I've tried to keep it very neutral, but I will use Facebook and Instagram in the next few slides, because those are pretty much the big two that most people are familiar with. Next slide. Reach. So you'll get this thing that says reach. How many people you reached? Pretty easy, but it's the big picture. It's the overall bird's eye view. How many people saw it? High reach is good, but remember how I said, you know, just because you got great numbers doesn't mean it's really great data. Knowing who you reached is even better. You know, I posted this cool video of the last sunset in Nuttiagvik, and it like blew up overnight. I'm like, oh sweet, my boss is going to be so happy. Until I found out that it only blew up because somebody in Texas shared it to some kind of you know, moms and toddlers group for some reason, and they loved it, which is great, cool. I'm happy for them, but it didn't help with our organizational goal of trying to reach people in our state. Next slide, please. Reactions. Actions and reactions. So this is the most important attribute of a far-reaching post. So, you know, my grandma, who only uses the one platform, if she likes a recipe post, I will see that she liked that recipe post, and I will see that recipe. And it then reaches me too, even though I'm a terrible cook. It also kind of tells the algorithms what's going on. It says, hey, people will take the 3 seconds to like click this and let other people know they like it. So this is a good post. Let's kind of bump that up. It's not a robot. So we'll put that on people's feed because it's obviously a real share. So reactions are good. Next slide, please. Shares. Shares is great. Shares is my favorite. It means your post was so awesome. Other people are sharing it for you. You know, your page might only get 300 likes right now.
Yeah, it seems we've lost audio with Dylan here. Oh,
My apologies.
go.
Can you hear me now?
there we go. Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. Where'd you lose me?
Look, just about a minute or two ago is all.
Okay, I'll just start over. So shares are great. It's so awesome. Other people are sharing it for you. 300 likes. Grandma. All right. Right. So, so each one of those people who liked your page, right? Those 300 likes, they each have about 300 friends themselves, and it adds up really quick. So if 20 people share your post and they each have 300 friends, that's now 6,000 people, each with their own set of 300 friends that have now seen your content. And best of all, it was absolutely free. So make your content very interesting and shareable. Next slide. Retention. This is only really important if you're posting videos, which videos are great because it catches your eye. Ooh, movement, right? So viewer or visitor retention. It's great for teasing out how interesting your video was. And it's also the reason for all those reverse cliffhanger videos that I hate, but they always get me, right? They show the interesting part in the first 3 seconds, like, oh, what's that? And then they go on for 3 minutes just to get back to that first 3 seconds. But this is especially important, say, if you're educating people via a 2-minute video, because you'll be able to tell exactly when they dropped off and you're like, well, they didn't get the whole message. So is that really a success? Or they got the whole message, great success. Next slide, please. So you take all that data and you analyze it, and it kind of becomes this big cycle. And after enough time, really depends on how much you're posting. You know, it could be a month if you're really active, or it could be 3 months if you're not so active, but you'll notice trends in your data. Who, when, and how content is viewed. And this kind of ties back into some questions earlier about when should we post? Well, it depends on your audience. And you'll be able to figure this out after a couple months of doing this, because it'll tell you, hey, this is when most people see your content. And so what do? You take advantage of that. Your next objective that you're gonna communicate to your community, tailor it so it works for that. Okay, well, we know someone said 3:30 a.m. on there. I mean, if you're my grandma, you're probably on it at 3:30. I'm not, but okay, so most of your people are there at 3:30. Next outreach campaign, let's set all our posts to go out 3:30 a.m. So see how it kind of becomes this living, breathing thing. We're like, hey, people really liked Kevin the Egg, not so much my coworker's lunch. Let's do more things like Kevin the Egg, like, the adventures of Kevin the Egg. I don't know, but you can kind of really tailor things and start to get this positive feedback cycle. And that's when you're in the socket. You're just doing great when you can really learn more from your audience than they're learning from you. That's the key, right? And it also makes it much easier to manage because you're not guessing, you're not experimenting. You're just like, hey, I know what my audience wants. This is when we're going to do it, and this is what we're going to do. All right. Next slide, please. So time for Q&A. I think, Taylor, you're going to help me here.
Indeed, my friend. First from Max, what are the times you post when you're posting twice a day? And there's a addendum to this. Lahua added that research shows that posting pretty early in the morning seems to be effective, but I still would like to know what are your thoughts, Dylan?
Good question. Like I said, I'll give you a guideline here, but I learned from your audience. It'll tell you when they consume your content most of the time, and adapt to that. But a good rule of thumb is absolutely someone was doing their research. Early in the morning is a good time to hit people. And afternoon, evening, after work, when you're sitting on the couch waiting for dinner, is a good time. Keep it spaced out is really the rule of thumb. So if you're going to post at 6 a.m., give it till 6 p.m. to post again. Because if you do them right one after another, it's kind of spammy, and also they're going to be competing with themselves. So give them enough time where they're not competing with themselves.
I would say 10 to 12 hours is appropriate.
Yeah.
And like you said, not only will they be competing for attention from people, also algorithmically they're competing. The algorithm is not going to promote 2 posts from one place, on the same moment. So yeah, good question. Thank you, Max. From Haley, excuse me one moment. From Haley, this is a long question. Should new programs that are being funded by tribes or larger entities make their own social media page? Or should they stick with posting to the larger umbrella social media page? She says too many pages get confusing, but without like specific individual pages, it's hard to be the quote face for the whole tribe.
That is a fantastic question, and an issue I run into all the time. You're absolutely right. Too many pages, it's what's going on. And just one page, you kind of, usually what I run into is you kind of run into this power struggle where it's like, yeah, you got a cool project, but we have these guidelines and you can't post Kevin the Egg here. And that's not great. That depends on your organization. There's pros and cons to both, because if your organization's already established, then great, you can get your message out to all those people right away. So what I tell you now is it depends how long-term this project's going to be. If you think it's going to be a good long-term project, make your own page and kind of cross promote off your current organization, because if you have your own platform and your own page, it's going to give you that flexibility you're going to need to really make things hyper specific to your audience. I don't know. Got any thoughts on that, Taylor? That's a good question.
I think what you said was perfect. Depending on the length of your project and the breadth of your scope, having the big page promote the small page. We have a similar system kind of at ANA. We have the ANA main page, and then all the regional TTA centers have their own pages. So the more specific information goes on the regional pages, and then the broad, weekly newsletter and bigger announcements go on the ANA page.
Yeah,
So,
that's a great point you brought up, Taylor, that I didn't even think about. It also depends on your content, right? If that's what we call funneling, where like you have the main page and it kind of posts the generic, hey, we need 30 people to clean up, trash in Wasilla. And then your page specifically can, give you the details, when the cookout is, what office pet looks like. So that's another thing to keep in mind for sure. Good question. Very good question.
Great question. Thank you, Haley. This one's from Rebecca. This is an interesting question. When sharing a post in our Indigenous language, should we also always translate what we are saying into English, presumably? Or would that narrow down our reach? Yeah, that is a great question. I don't think I'm personally qualified to answer that, but.
That's a good one. Yeah, that really depends on your audience and that's a good question, because nowadays it's doing the auto translate. I know that has a long way to go before it catches up with more Indigenous languages, but hopefully we'll get there. I would always say translate, because you're already doing all the work to get it out there, and you don't want to exclude anyone just because they might not speak one of the languages. So the more people you can reach, I'd say the better. So I would continue to translate unless it severely alters the message.
My experience with Alaskan Indigenous language says that the communities are so small and they're so desperate for anybody that the broader you can get, the better. They're, even one person contributing an interest to an Indigenous language project is really can be very helpful. So
hope you get that office cat.
Yeah, good luck to Brienne. I see you have your hand raised, Christina. We'll get to you after this question from Jolene. excuse me, how has your experience been in reaching 50-plus-year-old community members through social media?
That is the toughest crowd for sure. It's all about momentum with that 50-year-old crowd. And again, I can give you generic advice, but without knowing your audience, I can't quantify the specifics. But what I've found a good strategy is they're very rarely going out there looking for new things. They're usually there to keep up with their community or their family already. So you kind of find ways to wiggle in there. So if you can get like, geez, Wyoming is an example of, farming's very big there. So if you can use like a farming livestock swap page to promote your cause, that's a good way to kind of reach that older crowd, because they're usually in those sort of groups that are up to date on their communities and their, and I guess marketplaces are a great way too, because that's what that would be. And let's see. Yeah, and some past successes are, you know what, go old fashioned when it comes to that community and be sure to tie it back into your social media platform. Because, most of the time, you'd be surprised the amount of 50-year-olds who have it. It's a great way to keep up with their family. But again, they're just really not out there searching for new things. So if you throw a PSA out there, or you have an in-person event with flyers, be sure to put your Facebook or your LinkedIn or whatever platform you're using on there, because that's what they like. There's the link. I'm going to go there. I'm going to like this page. And then I know I'm getting the emails. So I would say, yeah, get in their community groups, work with their community groups, always work with people. Don't try to sneak in there, but say, hey, we're this, we want to do this because you have this crowd. And then always plug it into your hard copies. Here's our social media. Don't do a QR code with the 50-year-old crowd. Do a link. And using those two methods, I've had pretty good success. But it's always a challenge. I'm not saying it's going to be easy.
We had a contribution from Christina. She says, I was going to say on the translation, do both. Some of us don't know how to speak the language fluently and need extra help. And Christina, I'd invite you to unmute if you have something, if you would contribute your experience with us.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, for myself personally, like, I want to learn our language, but I don't know as much as I care to admit. But like, so when I do see stuff in our native language, I like having that translation, because it helps me, like, okay, that's what kind of that word means, and just gives me a learning opportunity. So that's why I would say do both if you can.
That is a great point. And yeah, thank you for contributing.
And
Oh, go ahead, Christina.
I was gonna say, for the QR code, I've been trying to use that more recently for like my work, and I have noticed, like, if your communities don't have good bandwidth, they don't have the internet, they haven't had that exposure to things on the internet, the QR code's not going to be very successful for them, because they're just not going to know how to use it. I've been running into this issue with folks in advertising for events. We've been trying to be savvy and have the QR code, and we've been trying to use Tiny URL too. But we've had issues with folks not being able to log into that, because they just, they're the Tiny URL. I've had issues with it where if you can't just click that URL directly, you have to copy paste it into your browser. And like, some people are like, if they're not very tech savvy, they have issues like understanding that that's an option. And so I've had to like literally walk people through, like, copy and paste that link into a different browser, and like, sure enough, they have success with it. So
Yeah.
Those are issues I've faced.
Thank you so much, Christina.
Actually, Christina brings up such a good point. I'm going to kind of jump off that. Did Mike die again?
Nope, you're good.
Okay, I don't see my box lighting up green. Sorry. But when you're making your content, that's a great point, Christina. Always shoot for the lowest common denominator when it comes to tech savviness and bandwidth. That way you're not excluding anyone on accident by, you know, posting a 600 terabyte video that's not ever going to load in. That wouldn't even load here in Wasilla with my Wi-Fi. But and tech savviness, yeah. If the more steps you're going to make somebody to do, like copy and paste a URL, I know it's small, but you lose them quick that way. So great point, Christina.
Finally, I have a question from Maya or Maja. Maja. Sorry, this is more of a comment on the translation of a post. I also advocate for using both languages. There's elders who know our native language, and there's the youth that are learning from immersion programs, but many of us between are not fluent. And that ties into what Haley and everybody have been saying, and Christina, about it's a learning opportunity really for everybody, and to also to get more people involved. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Are there any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat.
Or comments, you know, you guys are just as experts on this too, especially when it comes to using both languages. I'm glad people chimed in there because you know more than me about that. So thank you for the help.
Yeah, looks like we're pretty good to wrap things up here. Before we go, I am going to put the survey link back in the chat. I'm going to stop the share here. And I would really appreciate, both Dylan and I would really appreciate your feedback here. And then I've got a little bit of closing thoughts. So thank you all for attending the first day of the 2022 ACF Indigenous Programs Conference. Before we go, I want to highlight a couple things. Please continue to visit or begin visiting the 2022 ACF IPC website, and I will put a link to that right now in the chat. If I can get my mouse working here.
Thank you. You guys were a great audience.
Yeah,
It's
seriously,
always more fun with interaction, you know?
it's
I
much
can't hear
better.
you laugh, so I'm not funny enough to make you laugh anyway, but thanks for typing. It makes these digital presentations a little easier.
I will say Kevin had me doubled over. That is amazing. That was a great anecdote.
I liked Kevin the Egg. That was a good one.
That is just brilliant. And I would also, yeah, on the 2022 ACF IPC website, feel free to visit the ACF resources page to access more detailed information about the ACF program offices and partners. And finally, thank you everybody for joining and contributing to this workshop with us. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. So let me know, guys, if you want, I can end this meeting for all.
Looks like you guys had a good time.
We did, yes.
We did.
Good crowd.
That's awesome. I grabbed the chat box, so I didn't know if somebody was going to be doing that already. So I've got a couple of emails going. I forgot to grab the chat box before the Zoom meeting closed. So
Yeah, no. So do I not need to submit that to you then, Angel?
no, you don't. I have it.
Excellent.
I appreciate it. So
And I believe that this meeting was recorded, and I believe everything's recorded, including the chat. So it'll be in the
Awesome.
recording.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
Excellent. Well,
Just a
thank you.
fail safe for us. So good to
Yeah.
see
Right.
you, Ellen. How are
Good
you
to
liking
see
your
ya.
new position? Where are you at now?
I'm with the state.
Oh, nice, nice.
Yeah. It's
Still-
fun. Get a.
World about social media though. That's all good. So
Well, I'm honored to be back. I recognize some names. It's good to see.
that's true. That's true. All right. Well, thank you guys. Thanks, Pete.
You
Thanks,
bet, thank
Angel.
you.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much good. Do you have any closing thoughts here, Dylan?
Pete, so you worked with my mom
Yeah.
and dad.
I worked with your mom a lot.
Yeah.
Back in 08, 09, 10, something like that. Yeah, I worked for Apple for 10 years. And,
Oh, yeah. So the
I-
one-to-one program.
Yep, absolutely. So I met your dad a couple of times, but I worked with your mom a lot. And I was just looking, I asked you that question, then I went and I'm friends with her on Facebook, and I went and I looked, and there you are as her son.
Yeah.
That's
Cool.
amazing.
Well, should I tell her you said
That's
hi?
cool. Pardon?
Should I tell her you said hi?
Absolutely.
All
Tell her
right.
I said hi. Once in a while I exchange a chat with her, but yeah, it was
Cool.
fun working with her. She's a good lady.
She still talks about that was one of her favorite jobs, was getting those apples up there.
Yeah, she was just so much fun to work with too. Just everything was focused on the kids. I just loved it.
Well, she'll be thrilled to hear that.
Good. Yes, tell her I said hello.
I will. I'll let you gentlemen get back to work, but I had fun. Thank you both.
Thank
Great
you.
work, Dylan.
Thanks, gents.
Have a good one.